figure out that you can couch these ideas in these parables and that those archetypes will be remembered and repeated. So there's something, it's almost like hypnosis, right? You can hypnotize somebody by talking to them very gently. Oh yeah, and by the way, watch my watch.
Yeah. You're
but
very relaxed.
There's just a lot of, and then there's, the legends of magic and casting spells, and that was language, which is another thing. Yeah, spell.
Yeah.
Which we've talked about a lot.
And the concept that you can speak a few words and shit happens. Like, it's like you could send a fireball down somebody's throat or whatever. It's like and it's called a spell.
Right.
And then of course every sorcerer had his book.
Right. That he wrote his spells in.
Right. That he's
What was he doing? He was spelling.
Spelling. Yeah. Casting is an interesting term too.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, to me, like casting the spell is to speak it. Mm-hmm. So we talked about how these spells could be real, like this idea of creating and casting a spell, and then that spell causes all of this stuff to happen. We witness this every day.
Yeah.
Like Martin Luther King wrote a speech. He was creating his spell, and then he
spoke it. Did he write that? I don't know.
I'm just saying, if he writes a speach, and then he gets up on the podium and he speaks it to a crowd of people, and it causes all of this stuff. Yeah. And we're still being, like, things are still happening because of speeches given by great magicians, perhaps.
The Bible, massive spell.
Right. These people that wrote, the text that we consider ancient texts or biblical texts, they could be considered to have written spells which have changed the course of humanity.
And this is
still having
this
great
is
effect
interesting.
on it.
This is interesting because if you think of it in terms of that, why did a lot of ancient cultures had the resources and the time or whatever and the wealth to teach everybody how to read and write, but they didn't. It was a sort of a privileged thing, and you had scribes, and that was their job, was to read and write, and that was it. And maybe it's because they understood that it was a dangerous, powerful thing. Like, think of all the people arguing on the internet now, all of them casting spells on each other,
right?
And we just it's a giant, massive magic battle.
So thousands of years in the future, they'll be like, back then there were tweeters, and they cast tweets, and it caused all kinds of mayhem. They
specialized in magic that was done in very short bursts.
Yeah. How did they cast these tweets? Well, they used bricks. They rooted them in the dark. Yeah, they rooted their phones and made bricks.
All right, so that is the end of the second half of the first hour, and we're going to take another break, and we'll be back with you guys shortly.
Snake.
Hello, welcome to hour 2 of Brothers of the Serpent podcast. We are, I am Russ, this is my brother Kyle.
What's up?
And we are in the midst of talking about the 3 A's, which we see ancient civilizations being mostly concerned with. And we've gone through some stuff about the agriculture, but I wanted to get back to this concept of domesticating things. That word is sort of used loosely today. I mean, people are like, so they domesticated these crops, but what does that really mean? I did say in the first hour that the domestic versions of some of these plants and animals are so different from the wild versions that we don't even know what the wild versions are. Like, that's how different. Like, so if there's a wild version of corn, it's not really clear what it is.
Right.
It may have gone extinct.
Right. It's amazing to me that there's not fossil records of these.
Yeah, that's right. That's another thing you brought up about the fossils, and like we should talk about that because,
like, are there fossils that they're like, this is the original corn? What was corn like?
No.
However long ago.
Nope.
Or do they think that like?
I mean, there could be, but nobody's found them.
Okay.
But yeah, so briefly with the fossils, this is one of the problems I have with a lot of. Okay, the terms used here are misleading. The fossil record, and if you look at any textbook, and there's this implication that we have fossils that sort of give us this record of what has lived on this planet. So let's talk about what is required to make a fossil. A fossil is some organic thing that has been completely mineralized. All right, all of its organic stuff, its carbon-based things have been replaced with mineral versions, and they'll replace it down to the atomic level to where the structure of the original organic thing it's apparent, but it's made out of rock now. It's not made out of, of organic matter. That can only happen in very specific circumstances. So you have to basically what? Go ahead.
How do we know how many circumstances it can happen in?
Because of the way we find them?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it has to be specific circumstances.
Okay, so yeah.
I guess what I'm suggesting is maybe we don't know all of the ways.
I'm sure we don't, yeah. But still, okay, I'll just say this. When something dies, it falls down on the ground and rots. Right? Or if it's in the ocean, it gets eaten, taken apart. The same thing happens here. A deer dies, or a dude dies in the woods.
Find their bones scattered.
Right, like they fall. I mean, you can go online and you can look at time lapse versions of like some corpse. Like I remember watching one of a lizard, a huge lizard, and it was dead. And they just did this time lapse thing that went by. Days went by, and ants just dismantled it. I mean, the skin is gone, and then all the soft tissue just disappears, and then the bones start getting carried off, and
Yeah. And so what were the circumstances? That created all
the
of these
vast
fossils?
number of things that die here rot on the surface or in the water or whatever, right? So and the reason that happens is because of bacteria and ants and other scavenging things, but basically like you rot.
Right.
But we find fossils of like invertebrates, of like squid that have no bones except for their beak, and we can see down to the cellular level how they were built. How does that happen? They didn't rot at
incredible.
all. They didn't rot at all. Okay, so for that to happen, the easiest explanation. So imagine a dog. This poor dog's about to die. Okay, he's about to become a fossil. He needs to be picked up out of his environment, which is full of organic stuff. Okay, so he's in a forest. He needs to be lifted out of the forest. The forest needs to be completely swept away. Okay? So that all the way down to the bedrock. Okay? You need to get rid of the dirt and everything that has anything organic in it. You got to go all the way down to the bedrock. The forest has to be totally gone. And then the dog has to be mixed in with non-organic materials like sand, clay, stuff like that. And then he needs to be like completely embedded in it. That needs to be laid down, and then he needs to be undisturbed for a long time, tens of thousands of years. Okay? That is how you make a fossil. That is not a common occurrence. Okay? It happens a lot more often with sea creatures because the bottom of the sea is generally a sort of a non-organic environment, right? Okay?
So I'm seeing where you're going here. Like this idea of the fossil record being what was passed is like possibly just maybe a couple of snapshots.
There's
of like
snapshots. Exactly right.
And there's all this other stuff that we don't have records of at all.
I like to use this analogy. If you think of a record as in an old school, vinyl, like a big old vinyl, and you're holding it, and like, let's say you're standing there and you're holding it, like, this is the record of everything that's ever lived on Earth. Yeah. And you're holding it in front of you.
Waves.
And you just happen to be standing next to a freeway, and a giant semi drives past, woof, and the record goes flying out of your hand, and then it lands on the road and shatters, and then a bunch of cars drive over it, and the few tiny little slivers that you have left is the fossil record we've got.
Yeah.
Just these tiny little chunks that are snapshots, of what was on that entire record.
Right.
So the concept of the fossil record...
Should have made it out of gold.
That's right. Build your books out of gold. The concept of the fossil record having something you can consult, expecting to find, like, where did this come from? It's just,
or the progression of life.
Right. It's ludicrous. It is snapshots from cataclysmic events that geologists have not even believed were real for like the past 200 years or whatever. Like they didn't even, the idea of a cataclysm on a global scale, which is what you need to make something like, look at the Permian extinction event, which was or I'm sorry, is it Cambrian? It's either Cambrian or Permian. Anyway, that there's an extinction event, one of the first ones. It was the most massive that we know of. There's like 5 total mass extinction events that are global in scope.
Really? So we're in the 5th epoch.
That's right. That's right. The glittering world. It's the Permian extinction event and then the Cambrian explosion. That's what it is. So the Permian extinction event wiped out like 99% of everything that was alive on the planet at the time. Probably more than that. Okay, it was probably down to it wiped out everything down to like ocean algae. Okay, yeah. I've read some things where people are like, well, some cockroaches, some things like that, bugs or whatever survive, but I'm not sure about that. The very first thing where I read this massive thing on the extinction events, they were like, this wiped out everything down to single-celled ocean bacteria, basically. Okay, so whatever life was extant on that planet, on this planet before that happened, gone. In terms of evolution, if you look at it from an evolutionary idea that things were evolving or whatever, all of it is gone, all the way back down to single cells. And so then you have the Cambrian explosion. So the next epoch, they call it the Cambrian era or whatever. All of a sudden, and this is it looks like this to these people because of these snapshots. There's an explosion. Suddenly, there's life everywhere, and like we got ferns and bugs and shit crawling around on the ground or whatever, and they're not just in the oceans. All these different sea life, crustaceans, and that just comes out of nowhere. Well, it looks like it comes out of nowhere because you're looking at short photographs of long periods of time. Okay, so yeah, so going back to crops, not getting too far off on that tangent. Back to crops, the idea of maybe finding the ancestors of some domestic plants is, I mean, that's the odds are not good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you notice.
So how do you interpret that the ancient texts say, we were given these things by the gods? I mean, I know that there could be numerous ways to look at it, but
well, in my opinion, and this is just something I've been developing over time, I do think that there have been advanced ancient civilizations, like really advanced ancient civilizations, maybe not space flight, could be, but it doesn't matter. The point is that is it not easy to see how post-cataclysmic humans, who have basically been reduced all the way down to almost the animal level, like there are plenty of South American texts that talk about how their people, before the coming of Viracocha, the civilizer god, that they lost language. They didn't even know how to talk anymore. Mm-hmm. Think about that. Like, you can imagine losing everything and being like in the woods starving and but you would still know how to talk.
Right.
These people had lost the ability to talk. They had forgotten what that even meant.
Wow.
And it said that they were cannibals. They lived naked. Like they didn't know about clothes or talking. Okay, so they were animals. All right, but they were. The text makes it clear that they previously had been people. That they weren't. It wasn't like they had always been animals. And this guy came and we're like, you're monkeys. Yeah. Stop being monkeys. Right? That's not what happened. They were people that had lost everything all the way down to like. They lost everything, including the ability to speak to each other.
So you're basically thinking that the idea that we were quote unquote given agriculture or domesticated plants and animals from the gods, quote unquote, would be that like remnants of that ancient civilization.
Yeah.
Was lost.
So two things could happen, and this is just I'm guessing,
right.
But like you could say, all right. Because we do this now. We look at these ancient structures and we're like, oh my God, like who could build that, right? Yeah. So you can easily see some more primitive versions of humans that are and they've been living in this area, and then one of them finds up in the mountains, like say in the Andes or whatever, this just they know it's not natural, and they're just like, what is who and you think that that gods must have done this.
And maybe there's
there's statues,
remnants of their crops that are growing now. And,
they're growing quote unquote wild or whatever.
So they find this temple and there's all this food around it and everything. They're like, holy smokes.
Right. And so
smokes, let's go.
Smokes, let's go. So, but then there's too many legends where the gods actually come to them. So you can't just say like, well, they found ancient stuff and they thought, wow, right. Gods made this, and it really was ancient humans that they had forgotten about. There's too many times where they're like, not only did that happened, but there were also like somebody showed up and was like, hey,
Enlil showed up and gave the Adamu the plow.
Right.
Like, hey, here's this thing.
Go use it in my garden.
Yeah,
go.
Push dirt.
Right. But so there's too many stories of, and these are global, of someone showing up usually one guy with a sort of a group of followers. So you have the main civilizer god, and then his I don't know what you would call it, retinue, the people that follow him, and they basically go around and they find all of these stragglers from the cataclysm, and they give them their language back. They give them the understanding that you can make tools. Here's how to do agriculture.
You can live peacefully together.
Right. You can make laws that apply to everyone, that make you all sort of act better, and you have like the concept of civilization period all the way down to like plumbing and running water and everything. And they showed them architecture, astronomy, right?
And agriculture.
So given from the gods. Now, who were these people? I mean, that is the question. I mean, I would say that if there's a question that we will explore on this podcast, that will be one that we will be exploring more than almost any other one, is who were the gods? Because I think that they weren't creator beings. These guys didn't build the universe.
Yeah, that's another thing that we use to do when we're having a discussion about the gods, or gods,
lowercase gods,
or God. We use the uppercase and lowercase g, depending on what we're talking about. So if there's an idea of like a greater consciousness or some creative conscience,
right, or you, like
or whatever,
this vast like geometric concept of the universe, you might talk about uppercase G, this distant but intelligent thing, whatever. Or you're talking about ancient people talking about that. And then you have the lowercase g gods who are running around in butt flaps, also killing people and using giant swords.
Yeah.
But they had more advanced butt flaps, basically.
Yeah. So we look at the gods of the pantheon, and honestly the gods of most modern religions, all modern religions, really.
Yeah.
The ones that were like humans, in our likeness.
Right, that's seemingly immortal.
Yeah, that actually came here physically or whatever, interacted with mankind in that way. We call them lowercase g gods.
Right. And that gets into like, the immortal thing is another big question. We the search for life, for everlasting life, has been one that you can find stories about this going back. I mean, the story of Gilgamesh, right? The oldest known story. The human race written down story, Gilgamesh, was, he's like, I'm 3 parts God. How come I'm not immortal? Basically, and he goes on this giant quest. And he's actually given the plant by Noah.
Right.
And we know it's Noah now. He was like, his name was Xisuthrus or something like that.
And then a snake stole it.
That's right, a snake. God damn it.
Serpents. Maybe it was a good snake.
It was probably a good snake. Well, yeah. I mean, there's some indication that some of the gods were like, humans shouldn't be immortal. And then think about this. Like, we've talked about this before. Like, let's just, like, except for now.
Didn't he do just something stupid? Just like, hey, look at this pool. Well, I'm going to set this plant down and dive in the pool.
No. Noah told him that it was a water plant and that he needed to dive for it.
Oh, yeah,
and he dives and he finds it. And then he's like, sweet, everlasting life. And he passes out and goes to sleep. And when he wakes up, it's gone because a snake stole it.
Yeah.
I'm like, how'd you know it was a snake? You were sleeping, bro. But...
a good question.
Yeah, you can tell that it's an esoteric, it's a metaphor.
Yeah, but even that story, I was just thinking, I had this idea that the gods giving everlasting life, or whatever this idea of everlasting life, when you consider that humanity has been through multiple cataclysms,
right,
or the possibility that we've survived through multiple cataclysms that have almost destroyed us all and utterly destroyed our advancement and
completely rewritten the face of the earth.
Right. That everlasting, or man searching for everlasting life, could be that sort of like memory of mankind seeking how to make it through the next cataclysm. Right.
That is a really good point.
So
that is a metaphor for like, how do we survive these cataclysms without going all the way back to nothing?
Yes. So the whole story of Gilgamesh and all of his trials and the fact that he actually finds it but then fails and it's stolen from him is similar to some of the things we talk about today.
That was a bad snake then.
Well, yeah, it's similar to things we talk about today, like there is no space flight.
Mm-hmm. Can't go to space.
Yeah, because really, when we're talking about how does the human race achieve everlasting life? We got to get off this rock.
That's right. That's a really good point. Damn it! There's not individual everlasting life. Shit.
How did we get here from domesticated plants?
Okay.
Maybe that's what we are. We're all domesticated animals.
Oh
here.
yeah. I mean, like, they're like, yeah, God showed up and they told us how to talk and everything, and we were wild animals, and now we're what? Domesticated.
Yep.
I mean, what do you do to a dog? You teach it tricks, It fucking goes and fetches your paper. Anyway.
Here, come inside my garden.
Yeah.
Kill the rats.
That's right.
Chase off the possums.
Get Ace, goddammit! So, going back to domestication, like, again, I'll repeat again, probably for the 5th or 6th time in this podcast, we don't know how to do it. But you will not find that anywhere. If you go look it up, everyone knows how to do it. So what I should probably say is we haven't ever done it. And that is why I say we don't know how to do it. It's one of those things where they look at the pyramid and they're like, yeah, so it's there. So it can be done. So we know how to do it. And if we tried, we could do it. And nobody tries. Right. It's just assumed and accepted that we could do it because ancient people did it and they were dumb and butt flaps and we're not, right?
Right.
I'm standing there in jeans. I could build this pyramid.
Yep. I got pants.
I got pants.
Boots.
That's right. I got tools, machines. So no one has domesticated something to the point to where that matches in any way the domestic stuff that we use and we have been using for 10,000 years or whatever. So, and that makes it interesting. Like, you look at some of these ancient carvings and you see weird chimeras. Like the chimera is a specific being, but you can also use that term generically to mean it's a mix of stuff. Because the chimera's got the head of a eagle, and it's got wings, and it's got a body of a lion. Yeah. That's the chimera, whatever. I mean, the head of a lion, maybe. I don't know. But so there are chimeric creatures in all these ancient carvings that appear to be interacting. Now, you see esoteric meanings to those creatures.
Right.
And we know that the Egyptians made their gods into therianthropes. They were human-shaped bodies with some animal head, right? Like Hermes Tahoti Thoth was given the ibis bird head with the long curved beak. Yep. Now, did he really have an ibis head? Probably not. Why did they give him an ibis head? I've never been able to figure that out.
Yeah, I don't know. And why was Horus a falcon?
That's right. Yeah. The Horus King, the falcon. I don't know. I mean, but
I shall marry this princess as a falcon.
I shall marry her as a falcon. We shall have children. They shall be foulmen.
And they will become the foul kings.
That's right. They shall be kings. Foul kingmen. We spent 2 or 3 days. My uncle went to Egypt just before the Egyptian Spring, which destroyed a lot of ancient temples there. And so just before that, he was in Egypt, spent 2 weeks there, and he had a 16 megapixel camera, and took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos. And when I found those out, I was like, dude, you gotta give them to me right now. So he sent me a jump drive full of them, and we spent days looking through very carefully these high resolution pictures, and like it's just all of the
statue of that falcon. Like, he looks so smug, just like it's like he's saying no, all the time.
Every time the falcon came up, you see him.
No. And you have to, like, if we were just making up this stupid stuff, like if you were one of his subjects, you had to ask a question
that he could say no
to. He could say no to in order to get it, because if he really wanted to do it, he couldn't say yes, because just his face like,
is a no face.
Like, you say, "Oh, king, would you like to marry this woman as a falcon?" Ask me if I would not like to marry her as a falcon.
Would you not like to marry her as a falcon, O king?
No. It's retarded.
Yeah, but so the idea of chimeric creations has always kind of been a concept. Like, was there somebody way back in history? Like, okay, so we have this domestication. Who is doing this? Like, there's this idea that, okay, so I was saying that, if you go ask on the internet, can we domesticate stuff, or do we know how this was done? They'll say yes, and they'll tell you that the way it was done was over hundreds of years of culling, basically, where
right,
you're sort of breeding them for the traits you want, and you end up with this domestic thing. Well, that makes zero sense in terms of agriculture. If you just want to look at it from from terms of crops. Like, in order to do that, you need to not move around. Okay, we're learning this right now. To be a farmer, you cannot be moving around. You've got to stay where your fields are because they need constant maintenance.
Yep.
Okay. And let's say that you are a hunter-gatherer, and you decide, for whatever reason, you're like, man, tired of walking, I'm gonna stay here. Okay, and you know that like during the winter periods, some animals leave, and some, normally you'd be following herds around or whatever. So you're gonna need, if you're gonna stay in this spot and not be roaming off miles and miles, foraging, you're gonna need to have a source of food there that is constant, that you can sort of hopefully rely on. Well, you don't have anything. You have no domestic crops. And there isn't anything wild, like I was talking about with the grasses. Like if you were going to try to grow grain, well, guess what? There isn't any grain. And in order to do what they're talking about, to cull, so you get a plot of land, and you're like, all right, I'm going to plant these grass seeds here, and my great-great-great-grandsons will have food. No, that doesn't work. That doesn't make any sense.
And in order to plant these grass seeds very easily, I will get this oryx.
Right.
And my great-great-great-grandsons will be able to use them as oxen.
Right. After they learn how to mine iron. Which I don't know about yet because it's down on the ground.
So that's a big mystery.
That brings up a question. I was not planning on this, but like, how did we find out about metals in the ground? Whose idea was it to like dig? And then they come up, you look at most of the ores that metal are in. You don't know. It looks like a rock. You have to do all this really specific chemical and burning, like, smelting shit to get...
that has to be, just to me...
How do you do... I can... The only answer I can ever come up with this is resonance. Somebody had resonance technology a long time ago where you could do something and you could see down in the earth, oh, look at that. That's weird looking. And then maybe you dig to it to find out what it is. And then you just, I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, who first found out about aluminum? It's a powder that you have to do really specific shit to get, I mean, like...
Even silver.
Yeah.
Silver is...
The only ones I know of are gold and copper that will sit on the ground as a piece of metal. Everything else is an ore, and it doesn't look...
Well, hold up. Stainless steel.
What about it?
From impacts. From meteorites.
That's true, yes.
I mean, because it's like nickel and iron.
And carbon, which is what you need to make steel, yeah.
Right. So, I saw when I went to, what's that?
And it gets smelted by the entry. Yeah.
Right. That impact site in
Arizona? You were at what is it called?
I don't remember.
Behringer's crater.
Yeah, they had a piece, this massive chunk.
They call it meteor crater, but it's named the scientific name for it's. They named it after the guy who was insistent that it was a meteor crater when no one believed him, Behringer.
Yeah, well, that thing is on display, like what they pulled out of the mine that's down in the middle of it.
Yeah,
it's huge. It's like,
and it was a nickel iron meteorite.
Yeah, and it was just shot. It looked like stainless steel to me. I was like, oh, man, this is freaking. So okay, my point is that could have been found.
Certainly,
right? And of course, I would think this. If you were even butt flap peoples, right? You're just roaming around in butt flaps doing your thing, and you see that the serpent in the sky, right? You see that thing come down, and you witness from far enough away the explosion or whatever. Like, man, I can imagine them saying, "Well, what was that? Let's go check it out." And it's possible they might find that and it be a relic that was passed down. For many generations. I'm trying to come up with the mundane
no, that's
explanation here for of course, Russ, that's how they did it.
The dragon came down and like when it landed, it blew up the ground and left these things. Thunder eggs.
Tell your King Arthur and
to me the sword and the stone. Like, I had this epiphany one day when because you're reading about, and you watch the cartoons, and there's this kid trying to pull, there's a sword stuck in a rock, and he's like, ee! And everybody goes to pull on it, and they can't pull it out. Well, if you look at ancient sword making, the best weapons, in ancient times, were magical. They Excalibur, they were magic. Like, people didn't understand them. They were like, this is magic. The Sword and the Stone is a story about a wizard, right? Somebody who had ancient knowledge, Merlin, and his protege making a sword from a meteor. Because the meteor
drawing the sword from
the stone. So you like the sword of this, like it's
unbreakable. It doesn't rust.
Right. This is why it didn't matter how strong you were. You know, and the thing is, like, the strongest men couldn't pull a sword from the stone. It doesn't matter how strong you are. It's just a rock that you know. But Merlin, the magician, the sorcerer, knew the ancient techniques. They smelted it and made Excalibur, right? And they probably pulled it from a crater lake.
Right. They pulled the original meteorite from the crater lake.
So the Lady of the Lake, right. So you get the meteorite from because Merlin would look at the lake and be like, that is a crater.
I wonder if you could use that analogy of the story to determine where it was found.
It's possible. It's possible. So the weapon they made, Excalibur, was made of steel.
Right.
And steel,
why it sliced other swords.
And I mean, it's just steel. There's no comparison to copper or iron. I mean, just it would be shiny. Like an iron sword is black.
And he would pull out his sword and it shone.
Yes, it would. Shine. I mean, it would reflect in the sun, and it would just be and it was. You could bend it, and it would go and go back to. I mean, steel is amazing. Yeah, steel is amazing.
That's a great. I love that analogy.
The sword and the stone, and the Lady of the Lake. Like I went round, saying I was emperor just for some watery thought threw a scimitar at me. They put me away. It was a fucking meteorite, you dumbass.
Yeah. How did they get to the bottom of the lake to get that thing out of there?
Submersible? Duh. Magic bubble? I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's
Gillyweed.
Right. In the beginning of the cartoon, Merlin shows up wearing they were a Hawaiian shirt.
That's right. He's a fish. Turned into a fish. So there's analogies like that in all kinds of ancient stories. This pulling the sword from the stone.
But still,
and I would never have figured that out had I not started to look into ancient weaponry I started to do that because I started to find out that stuff about hardened copper. Anyway, that's a tangent we can go on at some other time.
But still, going back to the main point here is that no matter in modern times when we look at these three main things, architecture, agriculture, and astronomy, we have not yet found the origin of that knowledge.
That's right.
The knowledge of any of those.
Some of the oldest known structures on that we've ever found are some of the best. That can't be the beginning.
Right. And from all these tales about the agriculture and the domesticated animals and plants just suddenly appearing as though it was a legacy.
That's right. So the people of Jericho, going back to that whole thing, they showed up knowing how to do this. They weren't dudes in butt flaps that decided they were tired of walking. They had probably lost their homeland in the cataclysm, and they were wandering looking for a new place to settle. And they
had one wizard with them,
right?
One wise man who knew of the ancient. Yeah. He knew. And led the people to the place where the knowledge and all of this stuff already was.
The hard thing to believe about that is that it continued. Well, unless the sage was very long lived, which is possible because of the pre-cataclysm legends of people's lifespans or whatever. But the hard thing to believe about that is you see this progression happening over generations that they get that somebody is still feeding knowledge into the structure of the civilization they were building. In other words, they would reach a certain level and they're like, now we can do this, and somebody had to know that next thing was there. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So that looks, I would say with that, either they were much longer lived than we are now, which is totally possible, and so the sage would live a long time, or that all of them knew enough to where they could pass this knowledge down to their children in such a way to where it wasn't.
And this goes back to the parable idea. Like if long before one of the technologies that they had was to turn this knowledge into an esoteric knowledge, something that would be passed down by using the parable or by using archetypes. This is the way to everlasting life.
Yeah.
Of humanity.
So let's talk about that briefly. Why? Are we getting up here on time?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll do that in the next section.
Yeah.
Of course, you guys, just click on the next file.
That's right. Just keep that question in mind. Why?
Yeah. Snake Bros.
All right, welcome to the second half of the second hour of Brothers of the Serpent. let's just get right back into it. I was asking a question. Why esoterica at all? Why are we hiding knowledge at all? What are we concealing it from? There's always this, there's always this concept of like that the knowledge will come to those who are worthy of it. But really, when you look at that, and so there's this idea of the path of the initiate, like you become initiated into the ancient mysteries, right? And there's all these mystery schools that spring up all over the place, and a lot of them, at least the more modern ones, seem to have missed the mark pretty wide. I can't say so for sure because I don't, as an initiate without a master, right? Somebody to guide you, you're just making your own way. So there's no way to know for sure. But so why esoteric? Why are we concealing knowledge at all? What do you think the purpose of that is?
Well, one of the things I thought of about it is that when I look at good and evil, okay, the idea of, well, let's just take governments, for example, throughout history. A monarchy, a king. He could destroy knowledge on purpose so that his subjects remain stupid, remain uneducated, and thereby they are easier to control. Or fill their heads full of lies, superstitions and certain things. We had talked about this a little bit in the pilot program about how, for example, the Catholic Church requires a person to come and confess their sins, right? And then the Catholic Church also defines what sins are. Yeah. And then they also define what happens to sinners who do not confess. Yeah. And it kind of, you can see where this is going. Like when the Catholic Church was a government, they wanted their subjects to come and tell them the things they did wrong. Yeah. And they wanted their subjects to believe that if they didn't, that they were going to die a horrible death and live forever in just eternal hell. Right. And all of that stuff. So
control mechanisms.
So it's easy to see, just doing a little bit of research in world history, how mankind, people seeking power, also seek simultaneously to destroy knowledge. Like China is blocking Google search, queries and stuff. Like they do not want their people to know certain things because it makes it easier for them to rule. Yeah. So to me, esoterica is a brilliant thing. I used to think of hiding the truth as that's evil, like that's bad. Secret societies I looked at like suspiciously, like why are they hiding stuff? I'm not saying I embrace secret societies. I don't really know at this point because it seems like a great idea to hide the truth in plain sight. And we talked about how the Masons, the Masonic tradition back in the day, when they were building cathedrals and temples and all this stuff, they put symbolism, the symbolism that is, that the Masonic tradition preserves, they put it all in the ruler's buildings. Yeah. So that there was no way for the ruler to erase it or to get rid of it. And in many cases, I'm sure the rulers didn't even know what it all meant. They were just like, yes, angels over there and, crops and everything's over here. And
man with a closed book right there.
People start counting things and they're like, hey, there's processional numbers and all of this. So it's obvious that they were hiding the truth in plain sight and just masking it, occulting it in something else. Like you can occult the truth in beauty and people will be like, wow, this is so beautiful. And they'll go and show it to everybody. Mm-hmm. Which is, the kings wanted to have these big processions marching up to their buildings and their castles, and they would show off all of their glamorous stuff, which, there were masters of masonry, which is also a technology and a knowledge that, quote unquote, was kept hidden by the Masons, and you could only learn it if you joined them because they, it seems obvious to me, they wanted to preserve that knowledge and the way to do it, also preserving other knowledge while preserving the knowledge of masonry. So
I've always figured that somebody at some point figured out that building things out of stone is always going to be something that rulers want.
Right.
And if you wipe out all your masons, you just like kill them all down to a man because they're they're stuck up or whatever. You don't like them. They don't like their faces, and you kill them all, and then you're like, then you want a castle.
Well, you're screwed.
You're screwed, yeah, because they have to start from scratch. There's a lot of knowledge in masonry that is passed down from master to apprentice that is not intuitive. And so it's one of those technologies or bodies of knowledge that has grown generationally, and like over time, somebody finds out one thing that, man, this works great. Another dude finds a secret, and they sort of collude with this, and then you build up this storehood of knowledge, but it has to be passed down. So the apprentice learns all these things, but if you kill everybody, they have to start from nothing, and you basically you can't get a castle. So,
right.
So the kings, the rulers, would tend to not kill off their masons because they needed those guys.
Right. So they made a deal,
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that a bunch of people, seems to me like a bunch of people, including other people that had bodies of knowledge, but that could be wiped out by kings, started to realize this and started to feed all of the stuff that they had into masonry to save it.
That's possible, yeah.
That's why you have what's called.
And then again, well, sorry.
It's called speculative Freemasonry. In other words, that like you no longer have to actually work with stone to be a Freemason because of this problem. Like it's speculative in the sense that like we want people that are artists, that are that are architects, that are wizards. You want people that can do all this different stuff, and you put them in masonry because the masons will never be wiped out by the kings because the kings need castles.
So on the one hand, it kind of sucks that the truth has to be hidden. But what I think is that if the truth was not hidden, then it would be destroyed by greed, by the hunger for power and control over other people. So it's necessary to prolong it. It's necessary to hide it, and esoterica is like, or the esoteric is hidden in plain sight.
Right. So it's a way to conceal your knowledge from destruction.
Right.
Not to hide it from people
from being discovered. Right. But again, we're talking about humanity here, and there are evil people that will also discover it, and they will also discover where it is hidden and why and how, and they will infiltrate those institutions. Okay, so this goes back to
Brotherhood of the Serpent.
Right, the Brotherhood of the Serpent, or
initially started by Enki to send knowledge out into the human race, and then it was discovered and infiltrated and taken over by agents of Enlil, who did not want humans to have this knowledge, and they began to propagate negative things using that knowledge. But there are still members of the
So it's a battle still with the esoteric knowledge. You have let's just use Christianity as an example. You have these ancient texts that when they were at the time that they were written, were the writers were encoding some ancient knowledge, or perhaps the writers were just writing some history, and then later on, people translating it encoded threw numbers in there and did whatever. Yep. The point is that at around the time that the texts were written, they were encoding all of this ancient knowledge. Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, some evil people and people that want that knowledge to be covered up even further discovered this about these ancient texts and started changing the meaning of them, or the original meaning was forgotten. And so then they start, messing with it and manipulating it, and
you get to a point where the original meaning is forgotten, but there's still people that revere it, but they don't know why.
Right.
And then you can use that.
And that's what we call quant stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's this old science fiction story that I read, and I won't get into all the details, but basically in one part of it, you encounter the reader encounters a scientific expedition that had been lost hundreds of years before in space. So they ended up on an asteroid. Okay, so the original ship full of like highly qualified scientists or whatever with all their gear, something goes wrong with their ship and they end up in the asteroid belt of the solar system, and they end up on an asteroid, and they are able to like live there barely. So hundreds of years later, you encounter them in the book, and their descendants have grown up in this place full of scientific stuff, books, texts, instruments, and all this stuff, but they no longer know what it means, what any of it is, but they can read, right? But they have sort of ritualized all of these things. Okay, so we use the term quant stuff because at the end of like in older chemistry textbooks, they'll give you a formula, and they'll give you the directions for how you're going to do a specific chemical procedure. And there's a lot of abbreviations throughout the whole thing, and one of them is quantity sufficient, right? Quant suff is how it's spelled, QUANTSUFF. And in the story, the people had various things that you associate with science that they would use to mean like amen or
the end of a prayer.
Yeah, the end of a prayer. And quant suff, they said it all the time. They're like quant suff, and they would repeat it as a chant, right? That this is good is what the quant suff meant to them. Right. We use it as a way to say, like we'll say that's quant suff is where use. And this happened to us the first time really in depth when we were looking at the concept of making horns, like instruments, musical instrument out of a ram's horn, which is curved. It's got this spiral. And you look, and Kyle was trying to do this. He had horns, and he was trying to like drill them out because
curved holes.
Right. So you got the first 1/3 of the length of the horn, which is also the tightest spiral coming off, is solid, and the wide end is hollow. So you have to drill a hole through that solid part to get through the solid part to get to the hollow part to make the horn. But how do you drill a hole in a spiral? And he directed me to this website where all these rabbis and stuff were discussing this problem, and the way they do it now is they use a lot of heat and steam, and they straighten it out, and they drill a hole, right? And they were discussing it in ways...
different ways, or you can cut this part of the horn off and drill this section
right.
and glue it back together.
And the way they were discussing on with the correct procedure was what other people had said, right? And they're going into all this...
more ancient texts,
yes. So they're like, well, Rabbi blah, 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 in 1436 said this, and you can tell reading the way they were talking about it, that they had lost the original, what was happening in the first place. They had lost the idea of what they were doing, and they were just doing it by ritual. So
we call that
quant suff.
Yeah, they quant suffed it.
So the people in the science fiction story did not know what chemistry was, and they had lost so much information that they didn't even have the information to again arrive at what chemistry was. That is quant suff, where you like they have lost so much knowledge, but they have this ancient stuff left over.
And they're still doing these rituals that get it right in some way.
Yeah, but they have no idea what you could think of it as you could think of any number of things that we do to, let's say that you've got a car, and way in the future after a big cataclysm, there's still an old car sitting out there rusting, and people once a week go all sit in the car, and they've got very specific ways of who's got to sit where and what you're doing and whatever, and they make the motions of turning the key, but they have no idea what they're doing, or that the car was even a car. They don't know anything. Right. There's just this ritual that they're doing, and that is quant stuff.
Yeah, and they believe that it takes you somewhere else.
That's right. And they all close their eyes and they're oh yes, I can feel it. They don't know what is going. Yeah, and they've lost they've lost the knowledge to even arrive at the original purpose of the car. So yeah. That's quant stuff, and that is one of the more difficult to explain terms that we use, but we use it a lot.
We'll run into it again, and it'll become more and more clear.
Yeah, we're
how you can use it. And
you're that's quant stuff.
Yeah,
completely forgot everything that they needed to know to forget about this thing.
But they're still doing it.
That's right. They're still doing it,
and they're almost doing it right.
And it's in a way kind of sad, because it's there's this desperate attempt to cling on to something that they know is great.
Right, and this goes back to the esoteric knowledge. There are obviously forces or people or ideas in the past that were trying to preserve the truth while hiding it. Why were they hiding it? Possibly because other people wanted to come along and screw it up and get rid of it or stamp it out. So a lot of things, there are quite a few, I can't think of any offhand, but things that are quant stuffed, and it looks like when you start looking back on how this happened, that there was some purposeful misdirection in what was going on, and that is why it is quant stuff now, because someone meant to make it that way.
I think magic contains a lot of quant stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see hints of things in there, but every time I start talking about magic, I start to think that this is something that I recognize that this is an ancient, awesome thing, but I don't even have the tools to build the tools that I need to understand what it might be. It's a lot harder to recognize quant stuff in yourself. But when you're looking at something else, somebody's you're that those people have completely forgotten what they it's easier to see that way, but it's definitely in all of our cultures.
At the end of a prayer, you're saying part of the name of the sun god.
That's right. Amen.
Ra.
Yeah.
That's weird.
And like Christians will tell you that amen means so be it. No.
So
nope.
So
It means hidden.
I explained one of that's my theory about.
Think of that. Hidden is what that means.
What?
Amen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Amen Ra means the hidden God, the concealed God. So when they're like,
that was another aspect.
Blah blah blah. Amen. They're just basically saying, "Here's my prayer. Hide."
that reminds me of another aspect of the hidden knowledge, the esoteric. Just to throw this in there, I did talk about this in the pilot program too, but the parables, the stories, the esoteric knowledge that is hidden in these stories, they also chose to create those stories and parables using the stars and the constellations, because they knew that those would not go anywhere. So there's like a story, and then there's a picture book. And if you can't quite remember the story exactly, if you had the picture book and you could flip through the images, you could be like, oh yeah. And then there was this guy and he did this, and then you flip the next page and you see the next image. So they did that in the sky using the signs of the zodiac, the constellations of the zodiac.
Yeah, and modern archaeology does not believe that there was a concept of the zodiacal symbols previous to Hellenistic Egypt, which would be when Greece was kind of running Egypt. So long after, it was like way after the 25th new kingdom and all that stuff. So you got Greece basically has taken over Hellenistic Egypt. So Alexander the Great has taken over Egypt basically, and he's running the place. That's where they think the first zodiac was. But I mean, it's crap.
That's like all these great civilizations that we know of in our past all did it in their own way. So it's like what you were saying in the beginning of the show, that this is a technology, and these other civilizations recognized that, and they made their own that was sort of current, right? And we might be doing that as a civilization today. I don't know. I don't know what our big story is that they're going to find.
Yeah.
In the future. How are we doing it? But
Twinkies,
yeah. Twinkies and sail phone.
Anyway, that's the only thing that's gonna be left. Twinkies. Ash.
Everybody in Cleveland got one. But what was your? That's my answer, or not answer, but that's my hypothesis. Looking at the question of why remember
esoteric. Laird Scranton had a great thing on this whole thing, and he said, because he was looking at the Dogon, the Dogon people of Africa that have an esoteric tradition, and it's the same thing as all this other stuff, and they have a whole bunch of knowledge hidden, and it's esoteric. But he said, when I looked at this, I'm like, why are they hiding this information? But what I found out is that anyone can be given this information. In other words, there is no barrier to acquiring the information.
Right.
You just have to want to have it. You have to start seeking for it, and then they'll start teaching you. Right? So no human is the key here. No human in the world. The Dogon don't care if you're a white guy or one of them or whoever. If you come and you are a seeker and they recognize you as a seeker, you will be given the knowledge. Like the people that the scientists that Laird Scranton studies, these guys that spent all these years with them learning their esoteric stuff. They were from Europe. They weren't Dogon.
That sounds like the requirement to become a Mason. You have to want to do it.
That's right. And you have to ask one. Yeah. So he was like, who are they concealing this from? If any human can acquire it if they so choose. And that was his whole deal, was he said, what it looks to me like is there is an attempt to suppress this knowledge that is non-human. That's the conclusion you come to, because you're hiding it from what? No humans. You're hiding it from people that don't ask for it.
Oh my God! So that makes So in the story of like the 200 that came down onto the mountain,
yes,
that betrayed the rules,
the fallen, yeah,
that took the daughters of men to be their wives, and the guy's like, hey, I'm not going to do this by myself, so we'll make a pact. Yeah, like those are the guys hiding the knowledge because they weren't supposed to give it to us. Because after that, it talks about how they taught mankind all kinds of things like magic and potions and how to make
everything,
how to,
metallurgy, agriculture,
color of the eye, and
how to
beautify the face and all of this.
How to make chicks hot.
So yeah, I can see how that they were hiding it, couching it in these other stories to hide it from those who already had it, that didn't want it to be given to man.
That's right. And that's an interesting story too, because most of the places you'll read that, whatever the text, the origin of the text is, there's just kind of an idea that these guys were doing something wrong.
Right.
And that it created...
Wrong.
that it created problems, right? That the knowledge that they gave man generated...
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that. Blasphemy. It created all this corruption.
Right.
Okay, so you say man that knows nothing is not corrupt?
He's pure.
Great. You
know, that sounds like a movement. A current one. I'm sorry.
He's pure. Yeah, so you get this idea that they were doing something bad, right? And there's all this complaining about how that mankind just went nuts. They had all this. All of a sudden, they're building things and blowing shit up and fucking.
And he thought he could be as good as the gods and build a tower into
That's
heaven.
right.
Blah,
and then,
blah, blah.
so then you get all these stories of gods having to smash man back down to size.
Yep.
Right. And
lowercase g.
Yeah, just going back to the Christian Bible, over and over and over, you see the same trend that in the Old Testament anyway, not in the New Testament, but in the Old Testament, over and over, you see the trend of like God looks down and sees man doing a bunch of shit, and he's like, "What are they doing? We've got to stop that."
Right.
And the reason they need to stop it is not because it's evil. It's not. It doesn't say it's evil. It doesn't say it's not because man is cannibal and they're eating it. No, it's because that they will become like gods if they're not stopped.
That's right.
That really bothers me. I've mentioned this to you, but I've been having recurring dreams about the Pillars of Enoch. You know, I have no idea why. I can't even remember in my life having serious recurring dreams before. But this almost every night now, I dream. At some point in the dream, I'm down in a cave and I see them, and it just like it breaks my heart. Like it is so intense, the sadness that I feel every time I put my hands on them, and I just like fall to my knees and weep because I see them and I understand somehow in the dream. I see them and all this stuff is written on them and like it's glyphs and everything, but for some reason like I know what they mean. Yeah. Like it's magic or whatever, and I see all this stuff, and just the knowledge of like what humankind has done that has been just destroyed over and over by something that doesn't want us to be in space is, you know, it's just like, oh my God, it's really intense. Like I'll wake up and just be like, okay, whoa. So that keeps happening. I don't know why. I've been wanting to bring that up, but like there's this is why I was talking about esoterica. My dreams about the Pillars of Enoch are just dreams. But esoterica is real, and it is global in scope, and it is attempting to hide knowledge from something that isn't us. Because if you're one of us and you look for it, it will be given to you. That's what Laird Scranton was saying, and I was like, that's intense. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great place to end the show.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know what to say. I want to have a dream about the Pillars of Enoch.
Oh man, they're so intense.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I'm hoping now that like these recurring dreams mean that I'm going to find them.
That would be great.
Oh man, but I'll probably be like,
yeah, you'll find them and then you'll glad.
Yeah, that's right. Never return.
Get lost and die.
Get lost and die.
Well, thank you guys all for listening to Brothers of the Serpent, and we are going to do this again.
Yep, it's going to be a weekly thing for now.
Yeah, we're still working out the kinks, and hopefully you recognize that we have a much better sound quality in this show than the pilot program, and we will try to keep the advancement to this level.
Continuous, yeah. And we're going to be adding stuff. We got all kinds of ideas, so you guys just wait. It's going to be amazing.
Oh yeah, what is there was one you were wanting to bring up. We have all these terms
that
we use that are just our thing that we use. We talked about it in both this one and last episode. That we're thinking about coming up with very short,
Succinct,
concise definitions to, and then we'll record those, and then we'll play them, say like with the bumper music or before
in the breaks.
or after in the breaks.
Yes, you get the break. Like we'll say we're going to go to a break. You'll hear some music, and then you'll hear a short one of us giving a short definition of one of our terms.
Quant stuff.
Yeah,
like in the shortest possible definition we can give.
That one's hard to do. Short.
Yeah, there are some that are very difficult, but
like these eyes is a good one. You give a short definition too.
Yeah, but we're gonna work on all that other stuff too, and so we hope you all keep listening, and we want your questions and comments because we don't have show notes. We're just like coming home from work, and we're like, hey, we're gonna podcast, and like we just get in here and have a brief discussion beforehand, and then we usually are like, whatever, let's just start it.
Yeah, we'll have a couple of questions maybe sometimes, but so anyone who wants to post questions, we will definitely address them on the show. You know, not that we have any answers. This is not a podcast about answers. We've already said that. This is about questions.
Right.
So if you guys ask questions, we will give you even more questions.
Yeah. All right. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.
No, we won't.
Woo-hoo.
But Snake Bros! Snake Bros!